Hello class. So in this video we're going to talk about the difference between subordination and coordination. And we are going to use the famous television show The Simpsons as models. Okay, so first let's talk about what it means to be an independent clause. Right? What is an independent clause? And an independent clause is going to be represented by Marge. All right? Marge is an independent woman. So if you're familiar with the TV show, you probably know all about that. Right? She can survive on her own. Just like Marge, an independent clause can survive on its own, right? So it can stand alone as a complete sentence. It's a complete sentence because it expresses a complete thought. It has a subject and it has a verb. Let's take a look at some examples of Marge clauses. Bart does not like to go to school. Bart is the subject. Does not like is the complete verb. Lisa loves the saxophone. Lisa is the subject. Loves is the verb. And the saxophone, of course, is the object. These are all complete thoughts. They can stand alone. They make sense on their own. Homer does not work hard at the power plant. Homer is our subject, does not work. Hard is the complete verb. And at the power plant helps us with a complete thought. All right. So coordination means you are joining two sentences together and you have decided that they are of equal importance, right? So to do this, you have our Marge, and remember, a Marge stands for an independent clause. Marge can stand alone, so you have a standalone sentence plus a fanboy conjunction, right? Fanboys is an acronym that will help us remember the coordinating conjunctions. For, and, or, but, or, yet, so. So you got that Marge, which is the complete sentence. You have the comma, don't forget the comma, and the fanboy conjunction, one of these, and another Marge, right? So you are joining two complete sentences together. This is known as coordination. This is known as a compound sentence. Here's an example. Bart hates school, so he makes fun of the teachers. So we have two complete sentences. Bart hates school can stand alone. He makes fun of the teachers can stand alone. But in this instance, you want to coordinate, then you want to join them together and use the fanboy so because it kind of helps us to establish that cause and effect relationship. As a result, Bart hates school. As a result, right, he makes fun of the teachers. So when you use a fanboy conjunction like so, basically, that second sentence is going to help us provide the effect of the first. All right. Now, a dependent clause is going to be represented by Homer Simpson. Homer is messed up when he is on his own. Without Marge by his side, things go wrong. He is dependent. He needs Marge. Right? He is dependent on Marge and cannot survive without her. Just like Homer, a dependent clause cannot survive by itself. It does not express a complete thought. Therefore, it is not a sentence. Here's some examples. Until the next time I see him. When I ran to the yellow house. Although I want to get an A in math. Right? Hopefully, as I read those, you could understand, you could hear that something is missing. Right? These are sentence fragments. So if you remember back in the last unit, we talked about what a sentence fragment is. And one way to test for a fragment is to simply say that phrase, I believe that. And if you put it in front of what you think or what you're testing as a sentence, if it doesn't make sense, chances are it's a fragment. Let's try that here. I believe that until the next time I see him. So if somebody said that to you and walked away, you would be like, okay, what? You didn't finish your thought, right? So these are dependent clauses. They need a Marge. All right. The awubis words are also known as subordinating conjunctions. So now we're going to get into a little bit of subordination. Dependent clauses also begin with signal words. We call these woobies words because they signal the beginning of a Homer clause. Okay. After, although, as, when, while, until, because, before, if, and since. These are some common examples. So just like the fanboys, right? This is an acronym. Woobies, it's not a real word, but it's going to help us remember. So if we go back a couple of slides, right, we have some subordinating conjunctions here. Until, when, although. Anytime you put one of these in front of a complete sentence, it turns it into a Homer, a dependent clause. Okay? A rule to know, a dependent clause must have an independent clause. A Homer must be joined with the marge by its side to be a complete sentence. All right? So let's talk about the three types of sentences so far. A simple sentence that can stand by itself is marge, right? Marge is an independent clause. A compound sentence is a marge plus a fanboy conjunction. Remember, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. You're joining two marges together, right? This is coordination. A complex sentence is when you have a dependent clause, right? One that can't stand alone, a Homer plus a marge, or a marge plus a Homer. So you can flip-flop the sentences around, and we'll talk about that in a minute, right? So again, quick review, simple sentences. A marge. Marge walks to the lake. Homer sleeps to school. Bart is cool. Lisa will want to get a dog. The last normal person on earth is Ned. All of these are simple sentences because they contain one subject and one verb. All right. Now, the complex sentence, this is when we have the Homer and the marge together, the dependent clause and the independent clause. Okay. So a Homer, a dependent clause, plus a marge, an independent clause. Until Homer met. There's a woobis word, right? There's a subordinating conjunction. Until Homer met Marge, he was a nobody, right? So here's your dependent clause. Until Homer met Marge. That can't stand alone, right? We need that Marge clause. He was a nobody. So that's why it's a complex sentence, right? You can also begin the sentence with a Marge clause with an independent clause, right? And follow up with a Homer clause. Homer was a nobody until he met Marge. Now, essentially, these are the same sentences, but do you notice a difference between the two? Well, if you notice that this one has a comma and this one doesn't, you are correct. But why is that? Well, that's another rule with sentence structure, right? So let's make complex sentences. The formulas are a dependent clause, use a comma, right? When a dependent clause begins a sentence, you're going to use a comma, right? Dependent clause plus an independent clause marge equals a complex sentence, okay? When they're joined together. Here's an example of a Homer and a marge. Until Lisa goes to college, comma, she will have to live with her parents. When the grass turns green, comma, Homer will have to mow the lawn. After Bart passes third grade, comma, there will be a huge celebration. Or, like I just showed you with the other example, if you flip-flop them, you can, if you begin with an independent clause and follow it up with a Homer clause, a dependent clause, you don't need the comma. That's the rule. Lisa will have to live with the parents until she goes to college. This is a common mistake that students make. Right? We want to put the comma here because if we begin the sentence with until she goes to college, we got to have the comma. But you don't do that. So when the Homer clause comes at the end of the sentence, there's no comma. When the Homer clause when the Homer clause is at the beginning of the sentence, then there is a comma. So notice there's no comma here. Okay? So let's practice the different kinds of sentences. Spillane Middle School is ranked number 1 in the state of Texas. What kind of sentence is this? Is it a simple? Is it a compound or a complex? How can you tell? it is a simple sentence because there's only one subject, Spillane Middle School, and one verb, is ranked number 1, right? Is ranked. Okay, simple sentence. What about this one? Mrs. Harris is quite a strange teacher, comma, but Mr. Horner, Mrs. Ayler, Mrs. Martin, and Mr. Thompson are even stranger. What kind of sentence is this? This is a compound sentence because we're joining two sentences, two Marge clauses. Mrs. Harris is quite a strange teacher. That's a sentence by itself with a comma and a fanboy conjunction. Mr. Horner, Mrs. Ayler, Mrs. Martin, and Mr. Thompson. Now we have a compound subject. We have lots of subjects together, are even stranger. And that can stand alone as well. So that's a compound sentence. Okay? What about this one? Although I can't swim, comma, the beach is a glorious vacation spot. That is a complex sentence. How do you know? Because it begins with a Homer clause. It has this subordinating conjunction, the awubis word. It cannot stand alone. If somebody came up to you and said, although I can't swim, turned around and walked away, you would be staring at him like, well, you're kind of weird. You didn't even finish your thought. And so it's a complex sentence, right? Because we have a dependent clause, Homer, joined with an independent clause, the beach is a glorious vacation spot, Marge. All right, well, thanks for listening.